Hi guys, this is George back here with another video, and today I'm going to be discussing with you some of the UK roller coasters and rides that you may think are gone, however they are not. Of course, once rides close down at their parks, they don't always get sent straight to the scrapyard. Sometimes they get packed up and sent to a new location, and that's what I want to talk about in this video. So today I'm going to be discussing 10 UK rides that you may think are gone, but actually are not. They're all still operating, and if you wanted to, you can still go and ride them to this day. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about in this video, so yeah, let's get straight into it. So starting off with the Alton Mouse, the only wild mouse that Vekoma ever built. And this operated at Alton Towers from 1988 to 1991. So it didn't last for very long at the park, only 3 years. However, Alton Towers wasn't its original home. It actually started its life over at Wiener Prater in Austria, where it operated as Speedy Gonzales from 1985 to 1987. So yeah, it only lasted there for 2 years before being moved on to Alton Towers, where it operated there for 3 years, and it is now located at Idlewild and Soak Zone in Pennsylvania as Wild Mouse. So you can still go and ride this to this day. It opened there in 1993 and it is still in operation as the world's only Vekoma Wild Mouse. So now let's talk about Thunder Looper at Alton Towers, a classic Schwarzkopf shuttle loop that opened at the park in 1990 and closed in 1996, so operated for 6 years at Alton Towers. However, it actually began its life over at King's Dominion in the USA. And yeah, it opened there as King Cobra in 1977 and it operated all the way through until 1986. So yeah, it had 9 years over at that park before being moved over to the Jolly Roger amusement park in Maryland, where it still operated under the name King Cobra, and it operated there from 1987 to 1989. So it only stayed there for 2 years before being moved over to Alton Towers, where it of course opened in 1990 as Thunder Looper, and it now operates at Hoppy Hoppy amusement park in Brazil. It opened there in 1999 and it still operates there to this day as Catapult. So for those of you that visited Flamingo Land during the early 1990s and 2000s may affectionately remember a ride that everyone seemed to love called the Terrorizer, and this was a Fabry Evolution ride, and it was known for being very uncomfortable. It would hang you upside down for a long period of time with these big bulky restraints, and it got a bit of a reputation for not being particularly comfortable. However, this ride now operates at Baghdad Island in Iraq, so you can still go and ride this terrible ride if you really want to. So now we're going to talk about a coaster that only closed last year, and this is Speed No Limits at Oakwood in Wales, a Gerstlauer Eurofighter, and it opened at Oakwood in 2006 and lasted all the way until the park's closure in 2025. And this ride is currently under construction at its new home over in France, and it's going to be opening at some point in 2026 according to the plans, as long as everything goes to plan, and it's going to be opening as Titan at Walligator Sud-Oest. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, probably not, but at some point throughout 2026 this should be opening at its new home. So if you were a lover of Speed No Limits at Oakwood, or you want to relive those memories from visiting Oakwood, why not pop over to France and go and ride it in its new home. So for those of you that visited Lightwater Valley in the 1980s may remember a socket double looping roller coaster called the Super Looper. It opened at Lightwater Valley in 1988 and it closed in 1994. However, it was then moved over to the American Adventure theme park in Derbyshire, where it operated as the Twin Looper, and it operated there from 1995 to 2006. So yeah, had a few years there before it was then packed up and moved over to its next location, where it still operates to this day, and it opened at Legendia in Poland in 2007. It still operates there to this day. I've actually seen this ride in person, however I didn't get to ride it because it was closed when I was at the park, but it now operates there as Devil's Loop. So now let's go back to Flamingoland and talk about Bullet, a Schwarzkopf shuttle coaster. Of course, it took you through a spike backwards, dropped you down into a loop which went around the station, into another spike where it then would go back through the layout backwards. So yeah, it was a very interesting ride by Schwarzkopf, and it's actually had quite a few homes over the years. So Bullet operated at Flamingoland between the years of 1991 to 2005. However, it originally started its life in Wiener Prater as Wiener Looping, where it operated there for the 1982 season. After the 1 year it operated there, it was then packed up and moved to its next location, which was Boardwalk and Baseball. Yeah, never heard of that park before until I was doing my research for this video. And it operated there from 1985, that's when it opened, and it's unknown when it closed at that park. However, then of course it went over to Flamingoland, where it operated from 1991 to 2005, and it now operates in Mexico as Bullet still, and yeah, it opened in 2013 and it is still operational to this day, and it is operating at Selva Magica. So if you are familiar with Legoland Windsor, then you may know that they had a coaster operating there from 2004 to 2009. It was a Mack Wildmouse coaster known as the Jungle Coaster. However, this coaster didn't have a particularly long lifespan at the park due to a lot of noise complaints. So therefore, this ride was then packed up and sent over to Legoland Florida, where it opened in 2011, and it still operates to this day as the Great Lego Race. I have been on this ride and they call it the Great Lego Race. It's not much of a race, to be honest, because it is pretty slow going around those corners. However, it's still a good fun ride for all the family to be able to enjoy, and it is nice to know that a classic piece of Legoland Windsor history is still in operation over in Florida. So Flamingoland used to be home to a Schwarzkopf triple looping roller coaster known as Magnum Force. It operated there between 2000 and 2005, so it only stuck around for 5 years. However, originally it started its home in Sunway Lagoon in Malaysia, where it operated between 1997 to 1999, before then being moved over to Flamingoland, where it operated there until 2005. Once it got removed from Flamingoland, it then moved to a park in Mexico known as Aztlan Parque Urbano. That's what it's that's the name of it. I'm probably not pronouncing it right, but yeah, there we go. So that's where it operated, and it operated there as Chimera. And of course, this is where it suffered a pretty tragic accident, and of course back in 2019, which led to the closure of not only the ride but also the park. So yeah, this park was closed for a few years until new owners purchased it, I believe last year. So yeah, it's only reopened recently. But after the accident on this ride and the closure of the park, the ride was sold to Indiana Beach over in Indiana, where it operates to this day as the All-American Triple Loop, and it opened there in 2024. So of course, Chessington World of Adventures is now known as one of the UK's best family theme parks. However, originally it was known for having more thrill rides back in the 1990s and early 2000s. And back in 2019, they closed what was basically their final thrill ride. It was a Huss topspin known as Ramesses Revenge. I got to experience this and I did quite enjoy it, other than the restraints. This was one of the old gen Huss topspins, so the restraints were extremely uncomfortable. However, it was good to be able to get one ride on there back in 2018, and then of course it closed at the end of the 2019 season. The park did state that the ride had come to the end of its life. However, this ride has actually ended up being packed up and moved over to a new location, which a lot of people were not expecting, and it is currently under construction at a park called Sindibad in Casablanca, Morocco, where this ride is going to be known as Topspin. So a very simple name, however, is under construction, and it should hopefully be opening in 2026 as long as all goes to plan. So ending things off once again with the American Adventure theme park with the Buffalo Ride. So this was a Zamperla powered coaster that opened in 1987, and it operated all the way through until 2006, shortly before the park's closure. However, this ride does still operate in the UK as well. It's not even been moved to another country. It's still in the UK, and it operates at Twin Lakes Park as the Buffalo Stampede. It opened there in 2007 and it is still operational to this day. So you've still got this classic Zamperla powered coaster that you can go and experience. So for those of you that have all those fond memories from the American Adventure, you can still go and ride their classic powered coaster at Twin Lakes Amusement Park. So there we go, there are 10 rides that have been removed from UK theme parks. However, they are still in operation elsewhere. You may have thought they're gone, maybe you learned something in this video, maybe you already knew where all of these rides ended up, or maybe you knew they were still in operation but didn't know quite where they were. But either way, maybe you've watched this video just because you were interested in knowing where they are now. Maybe you want to go and ride them at some point and need to know where they are. Let me know if you have ridden any of these rides in their original locations or in their new locations, because yeah, I'd certainly be very interested to see like where you rode them and what they were like, because yeah, most of these I haven't been able to experience other than a couple of them. But yeah, I'd like to go and ride them in some of their new homes. It'd certainly be very interesting to ride coasters, especially like the one at Legendia, like knowing that that was at a park I never went to in the UK, but being able to ride that over in Legendia. Unfortunately, I didn't get to when I was there, but hopefully one day I'll get on it, and lots of these other rides as well. But there we go, that's now the end of this video here. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure to follow me on Instagram at George Kelly and follow me on Twitter at George Kelly. Thank you very much for watching. Stay safe everyone, and I will see you all later. Bye!